All right, everyone, I want to thank our sponsor today, Organifi. You know, we talk a lot on this podcast about healing and the healing journey. Well, an integral part of that are the foods and the drinks that we consume. I know you know this. If you're like me, you know the importance of eating healthy, but you don't always have the time or the willpower to cook with all the colors of the rainbow. Organifi's superfood blends make it easy and enjoyable to add more variety and nutrition to your day. These are delicious organic powders that you can add to water or milk, stir and drink. It literally takes 30 seconds. It is that simple. A couple weeks ago, I was right about to start a green juice fast, a kind of a short mini fast. And I kid you not, the night before, Organifi reached out to me about sponsoring this podcast. And I will tell you that I was thrilled because this is aligned with what I'm doing. I'm familiar with Organifi. I've used them in the past before. I want to be able to bring to you quality products and things that are going to promote a healthy lifestyle. Organifi green juice is the one I use. It's the one I use every morning so that I know right away I'm starting the day on a healthy note. It's loaded with vitamins, loaded with minerals, and essential antioxidants. As a listener of the Trauma Therapist podcast, you can get 21% off any item by going to Organifi.com/trauma and use the code trauma. Once again, to get 21% off any item, go to Organifi, that's Organifi.com/trauma and use the code trauma. All right, everyone, I want to thank our sponsor today, Organifi. You know, we talk a lot on this podcast about healing and the healing journey. Well, an integral part of that are the foods and the drinks that we consume. I know you know this. If you're like me, you know the importance of eating healthy, but you don't always have the time or the willpower to cook with all the colors of the rainbow. Organifi's superfood blends make it easy and enjoyable to add more variety and nutrition to your day. These are delicious organic powders that you can add to water or milk, stir and drink. It literally takes 30 seconds. It is that simple. A couple weeks ago, I was right about to start a green juice fast, a kind of a short mini fast. And I kid you not, the night before, Organifi reached out to me about sponsoring this podcast. And I will tell you that I was thrilled because this is aligned with what I'm doing. I'm familiar with Organifi. I've used them in the past before. I want to be able to bring to you quality products and things that are going to promote a healthy lifestyle. Organifi green juice is the one I use. It's the one I use every morning so that I know right away I'm starting the day on a healthy note. It's loaded with vitamins, loaded with minerals, and essential antioxidants. As a listener of the Trauma Therapist podcast, you can get 21% off any item by going to Organifi.com/trauma and use the code trauma. Once again, to get 21% off any item, go to Organifi, that's Organifi.com/trauma and use the code trauma. Trauma Therapist Podcast, episode 492. All right, guys, welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise awareness of trauma and to support new trauma therapists just starting out on their trauma-informed journey. I do that through this podcast and my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0. If you're a therapist of any kind interested in learning about trauma and you're looking for support and inspiration, I invite you to check out Trauma Therapist 2.0 by going to traumatherapist2.com. That's traumatherapist, the number 2.com. All right, let's get started. This episode is sponsored by Somatic Experiencing. Trauma may be a fact of life, but it doesn't have to be a life sentence. Somatic Experiencing is a psychobiological method of addressing clients' physical and emotional trauma conditions and helps to give voice to their experiences without a need for them to retell their story. SE focuses on regulation of the nervous system and offers the opportunity to engage, complete, and resolve the body's instinctual responses to traumatic experiences. For more information regarding somatic experiencing and the SE professional training program, the Trauma Therapist podcast listeners can visit traumahealing.org/TTP. That's traumahealing.org/TTP. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist podcast. Guy McPherson here, and very excited to have my guest today, Ignacio Rivera. Ignacio, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Very excited.
All right. So Ignacio is a cultural sociologist with expertise in sexual trauma, healing, and liberation for marginalized people. They're an internationally known gender non-conforming speaker, sexuality coach, trainer, and consultant. Ignacio, together with their daughter, Amanda, are co-hosts of Pure Love Talks, a YouTube series involving intergenerational conversations and lessons for creating sustainable relationships with children, normalizing sex education, and shifting the culture of sexual abuse. As a founder and executive director of the HEAL Project, Ignacio is on a mission to prevent and end childhood sexual abuse through healing the wounds of sexual oppression and embracing sexual liberation. All right. Welcome. Thanks again for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you.
So before we get going here, Ignacio, share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you're presently calling from.
Yes, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. Okay. But my family is Black, Indigenous, Puerto Rican, and lived there most of my life, and currently live in Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay. So let's dive in. How the heck did this start?
Oh, okay. This started so long ago. I am a survivor of child sexual abuse, and that trauma in my childhood really is the catapult of everything that I do today. All the work that I'm doing, the healing that I'm doing. And it was a family member that abused me for several years, and it was a female. And so at that time, I was identified as a girl. I identify as genderqueer, gender fluid. And so it was not anything that you heard of. No one was really talking about that. I couldn't really find any information around this topic at all. So that later on in life, coming to terms with that and really starting the healing process only began because I was not connected to my body. Mm-hmm. I was just not connected to my body, and I needed to understand why. And so through that, really started doing some work that I wanted to share with other people, with other survivors, because in talking in our circles of survivors, we shared a lot in common, and a lot of which was around not knowing about sex or sexuality or anything when they were little, and wishing that would be what could have been different, not understanding anything that was happening, and the effects that it has continued to have as adults in relationships and sexual encounters and intimacy.
Okay, excuse me. So, if I may, when you were experiencing this abuse, was there a point at which you were like, no, this is not right. I need to start healing. What did that look like for you, that process?
Well, the abuse for me started when I was 8 years old, and it went until about I was 15. And so I didn't know what that was. And it wasn't just sexual abuse. It was physical and psychological abuse. Mm. So as a kid, I really didn't know what was happening and who I could even trust or talk to and what I would even say. I didn't have a language to say the things that were happening. And so that person wasn't in the house anymore. I ran away from home at a young age, and there began a slew of trying to get my life together as a teenager, being homeless, being in really messed up relationships, and trying to get therapy and get right with myself. So it was a long process of finally getting to therapy, because I was in a college classroom, getting my associates at the time, and we're in a psychology class having a lecture on suppressed memory. And so that lecture triggered something in me, and I lost it in that class. I had to run out of the class, and I could not return because I was a faucet of tears, just crying and crying. And so my professor came out to me and said, "I think you need to go see the counselor." And so that was the first time I ever went to talk to anyone about that, a college counselor. Yeah.
And so how did things unfold such that you got to a point where like, okay, this is helping me, or this, I can begin my healing process? What worked for you?
I think it was not, I don't think I had a kind of vocabulary to say, what is my healing process? I didn't even know that. Right. I just knew that I didn't want to have, I was like, had insomnia. I had night terrors. It was just affecting everything in my body and in my spirit. So I just wanted that to stop. Basically, I was going to therapy just so I could sleep, and so that I wouldn't have nightmares anymore. And so that at the time, later on, I had my daughter. I had her when I got pregnant with her when I was 17. And so then navigating independent parenthood and trying to deal with the survivor stuff. And for a lot of survivors who become parents, give birth, breastfeed, this is a super triggering and traumatic time, which I didn't know that connection at the time. So my daughter, as she was growing up, my triggers and my anxiety and my OCD got worse and worse and worse. So at that time, it was, I'm in school, everything's getting worse, and then this class happens and it just comes crashing down. And then counseling, and then therapy, and then realizing, oh, maybe this is why I don't feel connected sexually. Maybe this is why I don't know what I want. Maybe. So I started realizing things, and I'm a bookworm. So I just started trying to get information about everything I could to learn. And I have to say, Dr. Ruth was my hero when I was a kid. I used to listen to her on the radio every night.
It's Dr. Ruth Westheimer.
Yes, I love that woman. I love that woman. She really helped me because I needed to know about my body. I needed to know about sex, and my family wasn't talking about it. So in secret, I used to listen to her, give people advice all the time, and write notes down and things like that. And so I started making connections with this idea of sexual liberation and healing from sexual trauma. Because of the way I started feeling, how I started feeling grounded in my body, how I felt like I had agency and power. The more I learned, the more empowered I felt. And I was like, this is information that everybody needs to have. And what's crappy about it is that, the work that I'm trying to do is really start from, or as early as possible, to talk about sexuality and bodies, because this is where we fail. And this is where, a lot of harm doers, have an opening, because there is no language, there is no connection.
So you talked about not feeling, I forget the exact words you used, but not feeling acquainted with your body or connected to your body. How did that manifest for you?
For me, like I started having sex at a very young age because I was, because of sexual abuse, I really learned that my body was something to offer up, and to and that it could be given freely, and that people had access to it when they want it. And so I started having sex at 14. At 14 years old. When I look at my pictures now, I was such a baby. I was so young, and I didn't know anything, but that was the way I knew how to communicate so-called love. And so not being connected to my body really was like, the act of sex was just the act. At some point it felt pleasurable, but really it was an act in and of itself. It wasn't about gaining pleasure. It was about the thing that I needed to do. And so that started feeling off for me. I think the more therapy I got, the more I started connecting to me, realizing, oh, I actually have say in this. This could look really different. I can change this if I want. So that idea and thinking about my healing, sharing it with other other folks who are in their survivorship, but also going back to childhood and changing the ways in which we actually learn and talk about these things, and change this culture of like shame and secrecy that it's so scary to talk about sex.
Right.
Or even how to do it.
Yeah. In terms of your experiences with different types of therapists, I'm gathering that you've had several different types of experience, some more positive than others. Can you talk a little bit about something, an experience you had when things started to work? Was there something that a therapist did or was doing? You talked about, starting to get agency and getting a lot of knowledge. In addition to that, what was your awareness about when things started to work for you?
I have to say that going to therapy was something that I knew I needed to do because I needed to verbalize something to someone outside of myself, that I knew that they wouldn't judge me. But I've had a lot of very negative experiences with therapists because either they are overworked and really don't have enough time to really, really listen to what I'm saying, and they don't realize that I have been doing my homework for a really long time on this matter. So I'm not a 101. I'm coming in there as probably a peer or probably knowing a little more than you. And I really want to have a conversation. I want to be pushed in my thinking, and I want some resources. I want, another level for myself. And I was never able to get that really until recently, actually. Most recently, I had a wonderful therapist who I set boundaries in my therapy. As soon as I go in, I say these things. I say, I am trans. I do not have body dysphoria. I do not hate myself. I do not want to die. My transness is not a topic of conversation within this healing that I want to talk about. I am into kink and BDSM, and that is not bad. So if we're clear with that,
let's go.
And so I have to set the boundaries to say, I know this about myself. I'm pretty self-aware. I want to have a deeper conversation about how I continue to navigate my healing process.
And you talked about having a child at a young age. Talk a little bit more about that experience concurrent with your process of healing or not healing and so forth.
That it's probably the basis of the show, Pure Love Talks, because I would say up until the age of about 3 or 4, I was a complete basket case. I just was super protective, had her sleeping in my bed all the time, saying that I was protecting her, but I would say really she was just giving me comfort because I was terrified to be alone. And she witnessed my complete OCD, and I was very nervous about, I didn't even, when she bathed, it was behind the curtain. I'd sit and tell her how to wash her body. And, so it was really a very uncomfortable and very triggering time for me. And so,
if I may, so you said you need to, when you're bathing, it has to be over there, put the curtain. You didn't want to see it or let her know that you were seeing it. Okay.
Yeah. To give her privacy, because I was teaching her about privacy and teaching her that she knows she can wash her own body, and I could just inform her of how to do this. And so I wasn't comfortable just yet. And so I literally hit a point where I was suicidal again, as I have been suicidal many times. And at that point, because I had my child, I was like, this is not an option anymore, and I need to really seriously get some help. And so that's when a shift happened for me. Mm-hmm. And I said that I can't be like my mother was and not share information with my child. And so that's when I started talking to her more openly and sharing information with her. And so that's basically the show, How I Raised My Daughter in a Sex Positive Household, as a prevention method, so that she would not have to, so hopefully she would not be a victim of child sexual abuse.
So let me just remind everyone that I'm speaking with Ignacio Rivera. Their show is Pure Love Talks, YouTube series. We'll have that linked up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. So talk to us, Ignacio, about the point and the process of when you said, you know what, I got to do this. I need to help other people get the word out. Talk to us about that experience for you.
I think that happened around probably 19 years ago when I'm a performance artist as well. And so I wrote a show called Lágrimas de Cocodrilo, Crocodile Tears. And it was my story of being a survivor of sexual abuse and incest. And it was a 1-hour show. And I actually got to perform that show and tour with it for like 4 years across the country and outside of the country. And it was an absolute healing tool for me. And what changed for me about wanting to help people and really go further is those 4 years that I was doing that show, I became a vessel for people to tell me their stories. Because my show was very interactive. And so I did my show that incorporated my daughter, my mother, my family, and posed things to the audience. And at the end of it, I had a Q&A. And I would give notebooks out to everyone so they could write whatever they wanted to me, to give me input on how the show could be different. So through the years, the show actually changed because of input that people gave. And so in that book, people were telling me that they were survivors, what had happened to them, that they had never told anyone. Backstage, I was holding people in tears, just telling me that I was the first person they'd ever told. And I was just like, I need to do some work around this, because people were just like, thank you for just telling your story. Thank you for just saying it, because that gives me permission. So in me doing that show, I gave permission to a lot of people just to release it to me. And I felt that a high honor to just accept that and do my own spiritual work to work through that, being a vessel, because it was a lot to take in. People telling me their stories, just like, I need to tell you this, And that's when I was like, this needs to be more intense work. And 19 years ago, there was no funding for child sexual abuse prevention. And 5 years ago, for the first time ever, I got funding to start the HEAL Project with actual money,
Wow. So talk about that. What is behind the HEAL Project?
So the HEAL Project is really talking about this cyclical kind of way that we can prevent and heal with one another. And it is working and healing with adult survivors of CSA, because most people see that as a childhood issue. And it has to be seen as a lifetime issue, but it happens in childhood. And sometimes the effects of it don't even show until later on in life. So we need to have a system in place for, this kind of healing. So we have that healing. And through that work, we get a lot of information about what could have been different if they could have changed the hands of time, what their families could have done to help them, support them, get that information. And this is what we use, and my own work in healing and working, trying to figure out how we get to be support to families on how to talk with their children about holistic sexuality education as a preventative tool and a life skill for their children. So it is about talking with parents and actually having them go through their own sexual liberation process or beginning, and then having tools for them to talk to their children at any age, to open up the conversation about this and how dire this information is to children's safety, well-being, emotional capacity, self-esteem, agency, power. I mean, it's endless. And so this is how we try to. It's a cultural shift we're trying to do. The work to end child sexual abuse is not work that focuses on sex education. So it is very interesting to me that we work on sexual assault, sexual violence, child sexual abuse, and we never talk about sex. And I think sex is the way that we're going to get to really making a dent in prevention of child sexual abuse, because we're so afraid of it.
Say more about that. The work of what ending, healing child sexual abuse is talking about sex.
It's beyond that. It is integrating holistic sexuality information into our lives, which means when we think about, currently how we think about sex education, I should say, and generalizing. When we think about sex education, we think about heterosexual sex, and we often focus on the ability for procreation to happen, and that we want to avoid that, and we want to avoid getting STIs, and we talk about respectability. And so these are the things that we teach young people, and usually we wait until teenage, maybe tween years, to start talking about this. The fault or the loss in that is that we only focus on the activity of sex for procreation in this very capitalist, heteronormative way, rather than from birth teaching our children the very foundational things that actually get you to doing the mechanical things of sex as you actually want to do it in a good way, right? Because what we're learning is communication skills. What we're learning is how to give a good apology, how to be a good friend, how to actually state your boundaries and not be scared to tell somebody. These are all life skills, right? And so when we think about sex education, we forget that whole giant piece. And this is why, as adults, we really suck at communication and suck at relationships, because we actually don't start trying to figure out who we are, what we desire, and what we want until we're much older. By the time we're 40 and 50, we got it. Right. We're better, in a better place, because we're like, I have all this experience. Imagine if we would start younger, and even starting then, we changed this idea of shame around sex, right? If we celebrate sexuality and talk about it in this way that it is normal, because it actually is. It actually is very normal. If we talk about it that it's normal, and we allow children to ask all the questions that they need, that it's no shameful, that we talk to kids about there are so many kinds of sexual orientations, and right now we think you're a boy, but that could change. We don't know, right? Mm-hmm. The idea of that is far beyond people's capacity, but that kind of upbringing, those kinds of conversations actually create a very strong foundation for not just sex, but for human interaction and connection. If we understood each other a little better, if we knew how to actually even have an argument without violence, Sure. So these are the very tools that we try to instill, because then as they get older and they're becoming a teenager, and you're talking to them about sex and bodies and body parts and all these things, when they get to a certain age, they're really in a place of understanding themselves, and they can say, no, I don't like that person because that person doesn't do this. They won't jump into the very first relationship because of hormones, emotions, and excitement that we all feel. Everybody feels that we're human, right? So it's tapping into and building the muscle of emotional intelligence in ourselves, and then we'd shift so many things, and we would see that this is connecting us all. Because I guarantee that there is a survivor within every political movement that there is right now. Child sexual abuse, and I'm specific with child sexual abuse, connects us all. It is child sexual abuse is rooted in colonialism and in war and in acts of war. It's how my ancestors, experienced things in slavery, and my indigenous family. Like, it is within the blood, CSA, and we ignore it. There's so much trauma. And I often think right now, senior citizens that are in their 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, I often wonder about survivors of that age. I really think about them, because we have often thought about this as a childhood issue. Those people have been severely forgotten. And I wonder what their healing process is. I wonder if they've gotten to tell their story, and they've gotten to, talk about this in any open kind of fashion. We're thinking about different eras. And so the HEAL Project is very intergenerational, talking about young people and older people talking together, and really trying to level out as much as possible that power dynamic between adults and children. Adults have a lot of power over children, and that includes the information that they give. And this information is life-saving. It is life-saving.
So in the YouTube series Pure Love, what's your objective there? What's your the passion behind doing that?
I think a lot of people kept asking me, how did you do it? How did you talk to your daughter? Like what were the conversations like? And so we just decided to just talk about it on a YouTube channel. So we have certain topics that we'll bring up. We've talked about, being mentally ill, and having PTSD, anxiety. And my daughter has a severe depressive disorder. So we talk about being mentally ill and sex. We talk about kink. I'm into BDSM, and she's always known that. I'm polyamorous. We talk about polyamory. She's known, so we talk about when she's met my other lovers and how that was, and me coming out as a lesbian back in the day and then coming out as trans. And so all of the things that a lot of people were just so concerned about in terms of how she was going to be. It's kind of interesting because my kid is pretty cool. And we have, a good relationship on top of all regular stuff that, parents and adult children have. But for the most part, we've had a pretty great relationship and, talk things out. And my openness with her really, helped shape how she sees relationships and how she decided to wait to have sex. For the first time. She didn't have sex until she was 20-something. And I was always giving her condoms. I was like, here's a condom, here's dental dams, here's this, just in case. And she didn't have sex until she was way older. Right. She had all the information. She was counseling her friends on sex because I was like talking to her. So it's really the show is storytelling and really giving some examples, some concrete examples, sometimes tying in things that are happening right now politically to how we're healing and parenthood.
Awesome. Ignacio, I'm just realizing that I'd love to have you back. There's just so much to talk about. I love your energy and you're so friggin' inspiring, man. It's amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
As we kind of wind down here, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
Well, the website is heal2end.org. So HEAL, the number 2, END.org. And we're Heal to End on all social media platforms.
Okay. And how often are you doing the YouTube series?
It's once a month. We didn't put one out this month, but the next one is coming out in November, then December, and then we will be starting season 3. So we are asking people for some questions, ideas for how we change the next season. And we do a monthly newsletter. So please sign up for our newsletter and we'll tell you about all our programs that we have.
Okay. Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. We need more people like you out there, getting the word out with I think the courage and the openness that you're doing it with. So it's been awesome having you on here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
All right. Take care. Once again, thank you to Somatic Experiencing for sponsoring this podcast. Somatic Experiencing Trauma Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to resolving trauma worldwide by providing professional training and education in somatic experiencing. It was founded by Dr. Peter Levine, author of the bestseller Waking the Tiger, who developed somatic experiencing based on explorations of how animals deal with threat, nervous system overwhelm, and traumatic experiences on a daily basis. Learn more about somatic experiencing and the SE professional training program at traumahealing.org/TTP. That's traumahealing.org/TTP.